All right, welcome in. I'm going to go through an example problem here straight out of your textbook that goes through how to find the derivative, the first derivative of a function. And the function here, we will need the quotient rule for this. I'm going to add on to the end of the video how to find the second derivative as well. But if you wanted to just get the first derivative, this is how you would do it. The quotient rule we use when we see a quotient, when we see two functions that are being divided, right? So right here, we've got f of x that's given to us. We're asked to find f prime of x. The numerator is e to the x plus x, and the denominator is x, so that's that division, right? When you have that, you have to use the quotient rule. There's really no other way to do this problem unless you turn it into a multiplication problem. It's actually possible here to do that, but I'm going to show how to use the quotient rule with this one, okay? So even though there's an easier way, I do want to show you the steps. Now, the way that we've been remembering it is with low d high. The way we remember it is that the numerator we define as high, the denominator we define as low. Low d high is the first part of the quotient rule. Low times the derivative of the high minus high d low. High times the derivative of low, all over low squared. So if we remember the low d high, you kind of can fill in the rest as long as you remember some other basic pieces of this. All right, so I need to do the first derivative, so I'm going to write this out. F prime of x is going to be low d high, so low, which will be x, times the derivative of the top, the numerator of high. So that will be the derivative of the numerator here is e to the x, because e to the x is its own derivative. So when I derive that, e to the x, I get e to the x, plus the derivative of x, which is 1. All right, so that's the low d high part. And then we're going to subtract high d low. Low d high minus high d low. So low d high minus high, so the high part was e to the x plus x times the derivative of low. Low d high minus high d low. So the derivative of that low was just 1. All of that is over low squared, so that's just going to be x squared in the denominator. And that is it, folks. That is the first derivative of that function. The rest of this is just simplification. If your teacher wants you to do that, I'd be fine with just this depending on the context of the problem. So there is some stuff we can shuffle around here and we can see if some terms cancel. So I'll go ahead and do that, but if you just needed that part, then you could just stop there. So I'll simplify the rest right here. So let's see, if I distributed that x through, I would get e to the x times x plus x. I'll put this in parentheses. And then I would have a minus e to the x minus x all over x squared. And I can see there that some stuff cancels out. So the negative x and the positive x cancel out. So that will leave me with, if I just go back to this other color, e to the x times x minus e to the x all over x squared. And I can see both of the terms in the numerator both have a factor of e to the x. I could factor that out. Again, this is kind of it's your own preference really. Depending on the context of the problem, you might not need to do this or want to do this. But let's say my denominator had a factor in it that I might look like, oh, maybe there's something to cancel. But otherwise, you just leave that part alone. So I end up with that. That is the first derivative, e to the x times x minus 1 all over x squared. If I was to be asked to find the second derivative of this, all right, if I want the second derivative of this, I could do the same thing and it becomes more complicated. So let's try it because I think it's good practice. So what would the second derivative of this be? Let's see. Let me write this out. F double prime of x. What's the second derivative? It's still low d high. So if I write that out, I guess I could. So here's high, here's low. Low d high minus high d low over low squared. Just do the same thing. So find the second derivative. Low d high. So the low is x squared. Derivative of the high. Derivative of that. And look at what happens here. I'm gonna get some big brackets going. My numerator, the high part, when I take the derivative of the numerator, there's a product happening there. So I need the product rule. So I kind of did that intentionally, so we threw that in there. I need the product rule for this, and that is just going to be e to the x times the derivative of x minus 1, which is just 1, plus the derivative of e to the x, which is e to the x, times x minus 1. All right, so I got a kind of complicated part. So that was the low is the x squared. D high is that whole thing, e to the x times 1 plus e to the x times x minus 1, right? That was the product rule applied to the high, low D high, minus high D low. So we've got e to the x times x minus 1 times the low derivative, high D low, would be 2x. All of that is over low squared, so that is going to be x squared squared. We can write it that way, even though we know what it would simplify to. And that is your second derivative. Okay, getting pretty crazy. If I wanted to simplify that, you know, I'd keep going. I don't know that I need to, but just for fun, let's see how far we can get with this. If we can have enough time in this video before it gets out of hand here. So what would we do? We would distribute this x squared to both terms. So we distribute that to both of those pieces, giving me x squared times e to the x plus, let's see what's that going to be, x squared times e to the x times x minus 1 minus, oh boy, minus, that's going to be minus 2x e to the x times x minus 1. Whew, that is gnarly. All over x to the 4th. I could keep distributing, but I think I'm going to leave that alone for now and really hope that I'm not asked for the third derivative. I don't even know if that step really helped us very much. I don't know how much simpler that is, because I could still distribute again. I think I'm going to leave that alone. A lot of times without context, it's hard to know how far to simplify, but just getting that quotient rule applied is really the important part. Remember, low D high, that's how you have to start, and just identifying which type of problem it is. So I hope that little part helps. It was from a homework problem right out of the textbook. Good luck.